Now that we've created those two new parts, we can move on to stage 3. Before we actually start making it, make sure you've got all the documents we need open. So we've got that original main assembly, we've got the axle part, we've got the small bush part, and then we've got the two new parts that we just made, the long friction pin and the cross block. Looking at stage 3, there's actually a smaller sub-stage that we're going to make first. And let's start off with that cross block piece. So I'm going to go to the cross block piece, and then I'm going to go to File, Make Assembly from Part. We're now in a new blank assembly. I'm going to choose that cross block part, and then press OK to insert that part fixed to the origin of the assembly. Next, I'm going to insert those two other parts that we need. So I'm going to go to Assembly, Insert Components, and before I insert them, I'm just going to pin that menu open. Firstly, I'm going to insert the axle, something like this, and I'm going to swizzle it around so it's in the correct orientation, and make sure you've got the axle that's 6 long. Then I'm also going to insert that long friction pin, and you might also need to rotate that around. You can then close that Insert Components menu, and we'll start to add some mates. Let's start off with the axle. I'm going to select a circular edge of the axle, and then a corresponding circular edge on the cross block. Then I'm going to make those concentric. I'm going to lock the rotation of the axle. So you can do this by expanding the mates. We can see that the concentric mate isn't locked because the circle isn't filled in the middle. So we can right click on the mate and we can press lock rotation. And now you can see the circle is filled in the middle. And then I'm just going to center the axle. So I'm going to move it to about the right position. I'm going to expand the axle part in the parts tree and find the plane that goes down the middle. And then I'm going to make that coincident with the plane that goes down the middle of the assembly. So that axle is all fixed in place now. If we look at the instructions, the orientation should be something like this. Next up, we need to put the pin into the hole. We need the large section of the pin facing upwards. So as we look at it at the moment, the pin is 180 degrees out. It's in the wrong direction. So if you do have it in the wrong orientation like this, you can either just rotate the part by holding down the right mouse button and dragging the part around, something like this. Or what you can do instead, say you're in this position, is you can just add the concentric mate the wrong way round, like this, by selecting the two circular edges and adding the mate. Now we've got that concentric mate, but it's in the wrong direction. So if you find that concentric mate and then right click on it, you can then press Flip Mate Alignment, and that will spin the mate around to the opposite direction. So it should be something like that. And then let's add another mate. So let's rotate the whole assembly around. Let's add a coincident mate between the bottom of that long friction pin and the bottom of the cross block. And then if you want, you can just add a final mate to stop that long friction pin spinning around. So you can maybe select a straight edge and then another straight edge on the cross block and make those parallel. We can then save this stage. So let's press Ctrl S. And this is stage 3 of the Lego helicopter. We can now add stage 3 to the main assembly. I'm going to press Ctrl Tab to switch between my open documents, and I'm going to go to that main assembly that we've already been working on. Now let's insert that new stage 3 subassembly that we just made. So go to the Assembly tab, choose Insert Components, and find stage 3, and then left click to place it somewhere in the graphics area. And if you want, you can rotate it around to the correct orientation. So just looking at the instructions, it should be something like that. And it doesn't matter too much if you don't get it right before you insert the subassembly, because you can just rotate it around by holding down the right mouse button and dragging the subassembly around. Now let's make this in the correct position. So let's choose a circular edge here. Let's choose the corresponding edge in the beam and add a concentric mate. Let's just drag it to about the correct position, which is about here. And then let's make the top of this cross block parallel with the top of the beam. And then we've just got to set the left-right distance. So we want it exactly in the middle of the assembly. So perhaps we could make one of these edges coincident with one of the edges of that front beam. But what we'll do is we'll use the planes just to ensure that it's exactly at the middle of the assembly. So expand that stage 3 subassembly in the parts tree. Then find the plane that goes down the middle. So for me, this is the top plane. And then just line that up with the corresponding plane in the assembly, which for me is the right plane. And so I'm going to make those coincident. So we're really starting to see that shape of the chopper fuselage coming out now. The last thing that we've got to do in this stage is add one more of those bush parts. Now you can just go to Insert Components and then find that part and insert it. But if you spin the model around, you can see we've actually already got one of those parts. So we can just copy it from the assembly to add a new one. You can do this just by holding down the Control key and then left clicking and dragging from an existing part. Then release the left click and you should insert another copy of that part. We can then mate this in position. So I'm going to select a circular face on the bush, also a circular face on the axle, and make those concentric. I'm going to lock the rotation. So I'm just going to expand the mates here on the left. I'm going to right click on the latest concentric one and press lock rotation. And then I'm just going to select this outer face of the beam and the inner face of the bush and make those coincident. So stage 3 is now complete. In the next video, we're moving on to stage 4. We need to make 2 new parts. They're both quite simple beams, so they should be pretty quick to make.